So, for those of you, I see a lot of familiar faces. The Denver Justice and Peace Community has been around for 40 years, and you've seen many faces, and some of you know it from different times. Welcome. Now, we used to have these evening talks that used to be called salons. We changed their name to forums. In Spanish, it didn't really translate. So we want to bring more people to the room that might be more inclined to attend a forum, una plática, instead of un salón. Right? Are you going to dance? Anyway,
we're Paris, and then we're supposed to say we're all British people in Paris and doing that, discuss literature.
Yeah. So welcome tonight. We want to thank the American Friends Service Committee for co-hosting us here. Gabriela Flora is here representing them. So we are going to have Dana Frank tonight, who's going to be talking about her book on Honduras, her recent publication. And there's also going to be a talk tomorrow at the DU, who has been the financial supporter to get Dana here. So we thank the Latin America Center and Professor Lynn Holland's master's program to make this happen. I want to make a couple of announcements. We have another forum coming up next month with Peter Kornblum, who's going to be talking about Cuba and U.S. relations. That is going to be in our other location, which is our where our office is at the United Methodist Church in the Highlands, and it's 3131 Osceola, and it's going to be February 13th at 6 p.m. I hope you all can join us. There's a flyer going around. And I also want to remind you that all this work is done mostly by volunteers, like many of you, but also we are accepting donations to cover the cost of the office. And this will be standing over there, and at the end I'll take another call for donations. And Gabriela has a little announcement.
Welcome everyone, wonderful to see such a great crowd on such an important issue. We want to remind people that AFSC has our quarterly vigils in front of the GO Detention Center. I think this is a particularly important time to be out there. It's this coming Monday, February 3rd at 6 p.m. in Aurora. Thank you, Jane. On the 4th, Monday the 4th at 3130 Oakland Street in Aurora. Come see me if you need more information. And if you're interested in getting involved in passing a really important bill at the state level to keep ICE, to work to keep ICE out of our communities, there will be a training February 16th from 10 to 4 at the CERC office, called Human Rights Coalition office, 2525 Alameda on February 16th. Feel free to come and see
Okay, so I can tell you what I am. Go ahead. Okay. Well, and there's I don't know we're using this. There's a chair here, and there's a chair here. This one has t-shirt hoodies. I always say, other students want to sit, but if somebody came in and you need a chair, there's one here, and this one can be moved over here if someone wants to sit down. No? Does everybody have a chair? Aaron, do you need a chair? Running around?
I'll be breaking.
Okay, so I just want to try and move up to the front of the, oh, there's another one in the back. You don't want to have, okay, we're having a little scene going on here. Thank you, Lynn Holland, for bringing me here. Thank you to Rebecca for inviting me. Thank you, Gabriela. AFSC, I'm a huge fan of AFSC. I work with AFSC in Washington, and also with LNC Poland and Oakland. And the AFSC building is right across from the Senate office building, and a friend of mine was right behind it, so right across the street from Jeff Sessions. It's all right, very intimate there. And there were the guys that had the cabinet offices that had the like apartment that for nothing, you know, that condo. He's like right all there. It's like, oh, it's like know your capital. Thanks, Aaron, who's also the kids who I know from Honduras work, and I'm just thrilled that you all came, and I also got to talk to College State last night. I never been to Denver before, so it's a big deal to see it. And I was flying in from California, and I'm used to my Sierra Nevada, but I was trying to pick up on some sleep, and I had the window down. I never have a window seat, but I was in the back, and I paid $75 to get an aisle seat, and the whole row was empty. But and then you live from flying. And so they said, okay, we're gonna land now, and I opened the window. It was like, boom! There's the Rockies covered in snow. So that was a big high for me. Of course, my mountains aren't better than your mountains, but still. And also, I was never the better, but my grandfather was born in Uray, so I have my Colorado roots. Okay, so, and most importantly, thank you for coming and for caring about Honduras, especially in a difficult time, although it's been difficult for 15 years. So what I'm going to do here, maybe somebody has a copy of the book. I'll show you what it looks like. Oh, that's me. And where does that shirt? I have so many nice shirts, right? This is what it looks like. And it just came out this fall, and I did not know there was going to be a caravan. I did not know that Honduras would be the October surprise when I wrote this book. And I've been drinking this really great fizzy water, but it might make me burp, okay? It'll keep you from being too bored. Okay, here's the emergency burp. So first I'm going to just talk a little bit about the book itself. I'm used to doing standing up. We're going to have a podium, and I'm tired, so I'm old, so I'll do it sitting down. I'm sorry, I have to let this a little bit. First I'll talk about the book, and then I'm going to jump into its content and frame my discussion less about what the stories of the arguments of the book, but really around the root causes of the caravan. So I'll talk about what's in the book. I think most of you are here because you want to understand why people are fleeing Honduras. What's the role of the United States on that? How are the Honduran people fighting back, and what can you do about it? So I'm going to get into all of those things, and so I'll talk a little bit about the book, and then I'm going to go straight to the root causes question, and then I'll talk about resistance to that. So who am I? I just retired in June from the University of California, Santa Cruz, where I taught U.S. history my whole life. I'm not a Latin Americanist, but I have taught U.S. what we used to call U.S. foreign relations. Now we call U.S. in transnational perspective. My background is in U.S. labor history and women's and social movement and race and ethnicity and activism. But I also wrote a book. I've read several books, and one of them is about the history of Buy American campaigns and popular economic nationalism and anti-Asian racism. And that was 20 years ago, and lo and behold, there it is in Trump's hideous inaugural speech. I'm like, okay. So I have a background also about politics and trade. And because of that and other work I've done, I have done history of the union label, a sort of obscure topic. And in 2000, I was brought in to help advise the Coalition of Latin American Banana Unions to maybe develop a banana union label for the U.S. and Canadian market. And I was the only person in the world who knew about the union label, so my obscure little research topic turned out to matter. And so I went and started working with banana workers' unions from 10 different countries in Central and South America in the 2000s, and that project eventually petered out for all sorts of very good reasons, but I started doing solidarity work with banana unions of Honduras in particular, and the Coalition of Latin American Banana Unions. And because I need a research project for that as a professor, I wrote a little book about women's projects in the banana unions of Honduras in particular, but also more broadly in Latin America. And that pulled me into the world of union activists and feminists in Honduras. And after that came out, but I'm getting late, I'm drinking fizzy water, or I was drinking fizzy water. Okay, so, and then after that I started writing a book, or researching a book, but not writing, about the history of the AFL-CIO's anti-communist intervention in the Honduran labor movement during the Cold War. And I had met a lot of people more broadly in Honduras at that point, and I had finished the research the year before the coup, and I'm like, okay, I've been doing it for 10 years, got the Banana Women book translated, I did close friendships, but I was not planning to do more research on Honduras. And on the morning of June 28, 2009, just 10 years ago, this June, I get this phone call, which was, let me tell you, no one saw it coming, except the generals that run the military in Honduras, that there had been a military coup and a democratically elected president, Manuel Zelaya, had been put on a plane by the military and packed off to Costa Rica in the first successful coup in decades in Latin America. that changed my life and that changed Honduras, and the book is built in part around stories of my own experiences in Honduras and Washington, D.C. since that coup, trying to do something about it, because the book opens with me like I wake up and say, what can I do to stop this? So I'm still trying to figure that out, and that's part of the arc of the narrative of the book is my own story. What I did do is spend a lot of time writing op-eds and articles for policy journals and working with people in solidarity and feeding things to journalists, and I'm getting a coffee maker over here. And after 2 years of that, I wasn't getting very far, and so I started writing more. I also started writing articles for the Nation and one of them starting in 2010. And after 2 years of all that, I felt like I was getting nowhere and I needed a new strategy. So I bought Trimble suits and started going to Washington and working Congress with several other people as part of a team. And I've been doing that ever since while still writing these articles. And the articles, after I wrote like 30 or 40 of them, and they all sounded like, I started calling them Dana's latest atrocity report from Honduras. Here's this terrible thing, here's how the government is terrible, here's how the U.S. is backing the bad guys, and here's what you can do instead. Here's how Congress is pushing back, and here's what you can do instead. Everyone was the same. Right? And it was like killing me as a writer, because before the coup, I had been writing and creative nonfiction, I had been writing history that was involved with telling stories with details. And while it was thrilling to be able to cross over into policy publications like Foreign Affairs and Foreign Policy that legitimated me and gave me power that I wanted, I was dying from as a writer. So I started just on my own writing stories about things that had happened to me, because I wanted to experiment with storytelling and making people feel things in different ways about the world of struggle in Honduras and things that I had witnessed, and some of which were very difficult, and some of which were deeply inspiring. And so what this book is, I basically then almost had a whole little book of stories, but then I sort of sat on them. I talked to one publisher and they said, oh, we want a big single narrative about Honduras. We want more context. And finally I realized that enough time had passed that people needed the context for the stories. And also I was ready to write that big book. And I had the research for it already in the can. So I then wrote a big, the story ends a year ago. So from the coup to a year ago, so the first 9 years. So I did write that big arc of the story and plugged in my own personal stories, alternating with the big story through the book. Because the big story is really awful. It is full of repression, it's full of tear gas, it's full of assassinations, it's full of really scary things the State Department has done, U.S. military, Honduran military, as well as incredible, beautiful stories of the resistance. But it's hard to take, so some of my stories are more comic relief, or to show that some larger political points, which I'll come back to that. It also, there's a lot of different audiences of the book. I mean, first and foremost, I think it's for activists and students, because it's designed partly to say, look, I didn't know what I was doing, and I ended up as an activist being useful in the world, and having deeply embedded relations of solidarity. But also, it does have a whole chapter about what we did in Congress, and I'm deliberately giving away the playbook with permission of everybody I worked with and with the aides. And normally, you hear about what the aides did or how things actually come. It's like, just Congress woke up and pushed back. It's like, well, who woke them up, right? You know who woke them up. It was you guys, right? It was all of us. And so I wanted to tell that story of how we did it and give that tools of the trade, because the previous solidarity books, they always say, well, so-and-so worked, some people worked in Congress and suddenly this bill passes about El Salvador or Colombia or something, and it's a hard work, and so I got to talk about it and tell stories. I wanted to be able to have stories in that part too. And also I very deliberately have the Hondurans coming to Washington. So I go to Honduras, and the Hondurans also come to Washington in repeated stories. And that's part of what's going in there. There's also, some audience may not want this, but there's as I say, I'm in the weeds. I tell you the story of how the policies develop and how the U.S. came, a lot of election stuff and U.S. backing for corrupted elections in Honduras, and how U.S. policy responded, for example, to the so-called crisis of unaccompanied children at the border in 2014 and things like that. So, and there are also stories about what State Department's done in my interactions with them and how imperialism works in live time. Because as a historian, I knew all these things, that U.S. imperialism does and how the State Department works, but watching it happen on a day-to-day basis, which I can tell you this has happened the last 2 weeks, it was like, whoa, and watching the lies and the deceptions. And it has been quite an education, and I wanted the reader to have access to it. There's a seat here, and a seat there, and a seat here. So if anybody wants one of them, you can go to the front row. Okay, and there's one right there on the front door. Thank you. And finally, there's some stuff in there that's comic relief, and the biggest one is the one where the chapter that's called Zero to Axe Murderers in 13 Minutes. And it opens, when exactly did I start using the term axe murderers all the time? As in, the president of Honduras is an axe murderer. And you can quote me, I say that in writing. And that's also about using the term alleged axe murderer, but what I was trying to communicate or deal with by making jokes about that, but also the bridge I was trying to gap when I met with congressional aides who didn't believe me, and I had 13 minutes to explain all of that. And if I talk too fast, stick your hand up. Okay? Yes. I could stop. Okay. Okay. And then there's also, finally, the last thing I want to say about a couple things about the book is, I am in this story. I didn't intend to write a book about Honduran politics with myself in the center of the story. And I'm not the center of the story, but I am in that story and my own learning curve. And there are real limitations of that because I'm a white middle-class U.S. citizen. I'm not Honduran, and I'm also white, and I also have U.S. citizenship. So that I'm protected in all kinds of ways, I'm respected in all kinds of ways. I have powers and privileges and limitations of things I don't understand in the story. And I want to underscore the limits of this book and what I don't get and the privileges I have. And I talk about those at various moments in the book, but I want to score that here because it's a complicated issue. I'm both critical of the book, but also my Honduran friends, I tell them this, and they say, we want more white people to get involved too, as well as, so there's a whole politics of, but how do white people exercise privilege within the United States in solidarity with this?
Is the book in print? Is the book printed? I didn't catch whether you've written.
Yeah, the book's been out since November.
Oh, okay.
Here it is.
Okay, that's what. Okay, thank you.
And to say a little bit about the research, some of these pieces were reporting at the time. The big one about going down, the big section about going down the first time after the coup was in the Nation. Several pieces were in the Nation. The part about the Indignados protest was in the Miami Herald. There's a lot of pieces some pieces I wrote at the time, some people's, and then also as a historian, I had records because I had been feeding material to congressional aides, sometimes on a daily basis for years. So I had clipping files. I was like, when some crisis would happen, sometimes I was in Honduras for them, taking notes all day, every day. And also I had my clipping files, and then every time I went to Honduras, I took 20 or 30 pages of single-space write-up when I came back, and I had all of that to draw on for the book. And also because I lived through it, I knew the arc of the story. And so it's methodologically different than if I was a historian, coming back, interviewing people, coming back, trying to reconstruct what happened based on newspapers and articles. I'm also using things like reports from Human Rights Watch and the international government documents that are becoming good again. So let me just turn now just to what's in the book. Again, there's a chair here that no one wants. Lynn, you want a chair? Come on. She drove me all over town. She should at least get a chair. So I think I used to talk, many times I've talked about what's been going on in Honduras, and this is in many ways true, as the river of horror filled with dead bodies and terrible things. And that is absolutely true, that has been part of what has been going on. But that's not the whole story, and I'm very deliberately, the book and what I'm going to talk about today has always been balanced with activism and hope and joy and struggle in daily life. And Hondurans are not just suffering victims, and I think so much media coverage is just, things are really terrible. Here's the mother sobbing over her dead son in the morgue, and everyone's hopeless. I mean, the Washington Post even said that right as Xiomara Castro's wife had probably just won the Honduran election in 2013. At the very least had been ahead of the polls before the election. So like the notion that everyone is just a poor sobbing victim is contradicted by a long history of activism that I'll talk about. And so the book is full of joy and struggle, not just victim stories. The way the media is talking now, in this astonishing way that Honduras has become central is that the narrative is that people are fleeing gangs, violence, and poverty. And that's what you've all heard. You can see it every day, they're fleeing gangs, and that is absolutely true. They are fleeing gangs, violence, and poverty. But what you don't hear is the origins of that gangs, violence, and poverty. It's not a natural disaster, and they are refugees in large part from US policy. Okay, so it's not a natural disaster, and they are refugees from US policy. And I want to talk about the root causes of that, gangs and violence and poverty, and that's what I'm going to talk about now, and then I'll talk about resistance to that. So first let me talk about gangs and violence, because a lot of the gang violence is caused by these very terrifying gangs that have their origins in Los Angeles and in repressive policies and racist policies inside the criminal justice system in Southern California, and the people were deported to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. No way to make a living, and both vicious habits spread. I'm going to go over here a little bit so that I can see more people's faces. Within Central America, the gangs were present before the coup. There's no golden age there before the coup. But what happens is after the coup itself was a tremendous violation or destruction of the rule of law, but the people that came to power afterwards had no respect for the rule of law at all. And the concept of the rule of law is one I did not even have before the coup, right? And of course we understand this, and the concept of constitutional order. Since Trump, we understand these things in much more direct terms. We feel them ourselves, you know, and it used to be this thing over there, unless you were from one of these countries. And so it opened the door for every kind of criminal activity, and the gangs massively proliferated along with drug traffickers and every kind of criminal activity, including the corruption of the Attorney General's office and the military and the police and the Congress and the judiciary. So the murder rate shot up to the highest in the world by 2011. It's probably still there, but the government is the only one that controls the statistics, so they just started manipulating the statistics. We can talk about that later if you want. So don't believe it when they say, oh, we have our murder rate. There were at least 9 massacres, multiple person massacres in Honduras just since the first of the year. And they don't count massacres because they say those are irregular killings. Give a sense of these things. Okay. There's a 95% impunity rate for murders and most other crimes. So 98, that impunity rate means that 95% of crimes are never prosecuted until they're convicted. So basically, you can do anything you want in a sense of doing nothing will happen to you. In that context, the gangs then really proliferate and take over huge swaths of the country, particularly in urban areas. I think people know a lot about the gangs. They kill people who don't cooperate. They kill women who are not, they force women into sexual relationships. They rape women. They kill young men, and they kill each other. So a lot of the violence is the gangs killing each other, but also if you follow the stories, and I won't repeat these individual stories, they're all in the newspapers now, beautiful stories of people, refugees, seeking asylum or in the caravans say, the gangs killed my brother, they killed my sister, they came after my daughter, they said they took my house, and now I'm fleeing. And over and over again, these vicious stories of violence. And the gangs in turn proliferated because the police are spectacular and corrupt. Again, there was corruption in the police before the coup, but the coup just threw open the door for the destruction of the rule of law and even more criminality in the police. The police very famously in fall of 2011 killed the son of the president of the biggest university and a friend of his when they passed through a checkpoint. What? They killed the son of the university president. When he had a friend pass in a car through a police checkpoint, they shoot people up at checkpoints. And that then caused a lot of attention to how corrupt the police were, and that even the government admitted that the great majority of the police were corrupt. And the police in turn, and police are terrifying. Okay, so at the grassroots level in the neighborhood, this is what the face of the state is the police. Okay, so a lot of the stories you'll see in those caravan stories are the police tried to kill me, the police were working with the gangs. So the police work very closely with the gangs, and then the gangs have moved into extortion, okay? And this is not initially true. This is around 2013, and they're still expanding. And which means that they go to small business people, and I know a lot of small business people, and say, you're gonna pay $75 every Thursday, and they know exactly how much people's sales are. what they can just barely, how they can just barely squeak by if they pay it. And if you don't pay it, you'll be killed, right? You have to pay it. And that people object or they don't pay it, they are in fact killed. And in the community I'm very familiar with, the suburb of San Pedro Sula, a barber barber objected, who filed a police report objecting to reporting what the gangs had done, and a week or two later, the gangs came around and killed him and his assistant. It was on video from the camera in there, and the assassins were like running around for a couple years, nothing ever happened to them. There's a old man that sells CDs and music around the corner from my friend's store, and he paid the taxes, so-called taxes, for a couple of years. And one day the woman came down around to collect, and he put his hand on her arm and said, "I'm an old man, I'm tired of this." And that weekend, the police and the military that were supposedly patrolling the streets to protect everyone against the gang, they disappeared from the streets for 2 days. Somebody came in, shot at the old man and killed him, and then the next day, the police and the military all came back. Okay, so you can see there in both of those stories the clear and clear evidence of the collusion between the police and the drug traffickers. The military themselves are also really deeply corrupt, and this is very important when you get the USA. We're going down there and helping them fight the drug traffickers. Okay, this is also highly documented. The Minister of Security, Julian Pacheco Tinoco, which means he's a former general, and which also symbolizes military taking over policing. But he is now the head of the cabinet officer in charge of police. He's twice been named in federal court in the United States in testimony as having overseen drug trafficking flights. The national director of the police, named a year ago, who was before that, one of them was head of military intelligence, police intelligence. Him and his second and third in command at the national level of the whole police were all documented by the Associated Press a year ago to have overseen cocaine trafficking and also intervening in the arrest of somebody that was arrested for something that they were involved in moving. So, and they had like 25 people confirmed that the document, internal inspection document that AP had was real. So we're talking about the very, very top. There's nobody above these guys except the president, okay? And so the very top of the police and the military are involved in drug trafficking. 2 mayors were just arrested or charged in the U.S. federal court last week, and one of them was involved in, when he was mayor of the town of El Paraíso, which was a town controlled by narcos. In the 2010 elections, 87% of the town voted for Juan Orlando Hernandez, the current dictator, in a town that in the previous election had gone 63% for the opposite, for the another party's candidate, right? And so it was like clearly just like controlling the whole vote thing, and there was a lot of that was mayor at the time, and now he's been charged with the drug traffickers. Most famously, you may have seen in the papers that the president's brother, Tony Hernandez, and you guys are, the president is Juan Orlando Hernandez, and we all just call him Juan Orlando, okay? So if you hear me say Juan Orlando, that's his whole compound first name. His brother, Tony, and I keep wanting to call him, you're old enough to get this joke, Tony Orlando and Dawn? No, he's a little turkey fan. Okay, so Tony, his brother is now in jail in New York, maybe Miami, but charged in the Southern District of New York. And they're independent actors from the State Department. Very interesting what those New York people are doing. And he has been charged with being a major drug trafficker and also moving arms in Honduras. And what there is, so the more and more evidence coming out, and of course no one believes, except maybe, who knows, almost no one believes that the president could not have known of all these activities of all these top figures, including his brother, who was a Congress member. So the violence, a lot of the violence, is committed by drug traffickers among themselves, but also killing people who won't cooperate, killing people who are seen as a threat. The police and the gangs kill people who are viewed as informants, who file police reports, and they all kill. So most of the violence that you're seeing is the drug traffickers and the police and the gangs killing people. The military also kills people, I'll come back to that. But also the domestic violence and killings of women has shot up the so-called femicides. And a lot of that is because you don't have a rule of law or any judicial system that's functioning, that you can just kill a woman, man can just kill a woman, or another man, you get in a bar fight and nothing will happen to you. So there's a lot, if you're interested in that, it was Women's Day on January 25th, and there were a lot of stories in the Honduran press about the recent statistics. Do you need me to slow down? I'll probably go for questions at the end, but go ahead.
Oh, okay.
No, go say real quick.
No,
I was just wondering if maybe you could go back to why a military coup has created the conditions for
Yeah.
not having any.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I'm going to talk back now to the coup itself and the U.S. role. But let me talk about poverty a little bit. I mean, basically, it was criminals that led the coup, okay? So the coup itself is an illegal act. The Congress and the majority of Congress and the Supreme Court backed the coup. And then they are working with drug traffickers and criminals of all sorts. And the gangs, and so that means all bets are off, right? So they're taking bribes, they're stealing money from the public coffers right and left, so corruption, and also you can just not show up to work if you're a judge or you're a prosecutor. It's just like there's no functioning state in the way we understand it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Which means that it's like anybody who's corrupt that wants to steal anything can do anything they want, within the boundaries of what the narcos and the military and the people, the elites. And most of the Honduran economy is owned by these so-called the oligarchs, or 13 elite families, and they are just robbing things from the government right and left. So, just little things, like somebody I know, there's a car was in an accident, somebody sued them, the car was impounded, the passenger, the judge ruled in their favor. The judge never even showed up. And then the person didn't even show up to go unlock the car, the van. It was impounded for 3 years, and they couldn't make a living driving people back and forth to school, which was why they invested in the van. Okay, so just this level of non-functioning of government. If you don't have a rule of law, and you don't have the elected government, you just have people that stole the government through a military coup. They can do anything they want. Does that make sense? It's hard to explain that you could there's no functioning state that you can make claims on to be responsible in the way we would understand it, right? Or even the way they understand it before the coup. So you don't have, you have so many levels of criminality up and down the functioning of government. Let me say a little bit about poverty in the state and corruption, and that may help you a little bit too. Okay, the other thing that people are feeling is massive poverty. Now, it's not like there wasn't huge poverty before the coup. It's at least 2/3 of the population is poor. Middle class is maybe 3-4% of the whole population. And now people are starving to death, and also there's been crop failures and drought, and if you sort of the coffee crop, so there's other things, agricultural issues in here that are also quote-unquote man-made, person-made, and but the coup also has destroyed the Honduran economy, what was there, and some of it is it's not a safe investment climate, right? So it's not a place, if you don't have a rule of law for property claims even, or you're not going to get killed if you're a businessman who has to pay somebody off, outside investors don't, and also the elites just rob the money from your investment. Outside investors don't want to invest in a factory or a store or a transportation project or whatever services in the country. So all the money in and outside investment just starts drawing up. And also all kinds of livelihoods are destroyed. And I want to say livelihoods, not just jobs. There's no labor law enforcement. Honduras actually has good labor laws on the book. But so that means that union activity isn't protected anymore. You cannot pay somebody, and there's, of course, like here, it's called wage theft, right? So a factory just shuts down and nobody, when people don't get their back pay, restrictions on how many hours or how someone's going to have to work are just not enforced. So that undermines wages and just literally receiving wages. A lot of sectors for development, and we'll come back to this when we talk about solutions, is a lot of what are celebrated as the sectors of economic development are actually the ones that are precisely destroying livelihoods. The most famous of this is African palms. And the African palm plantations have been imposed at the point of the gun, especially by a man named Miguel Facuse, and his DNOT corporation. He's died a couple years ago, but he was the richest man in Honduras and a big backer of the coup, documented backer of the coup, and he had a private security guard army of over 200 assassins and armed guards, and working with the military and the police. They've had, and local elites, forced thousands of peasant cooperatives, campesino cooperatives off their land, particularly an area called the Awan Valley, which is where land reform had happened in the 70s. In the 70s and 80s, and took over their lands through a variety of illegal processes. And then when people tried to reclaim them in the years after the coup, then people were just killed one by one, two by two, at least 150 people in the slow-moving massacre have been killed in the Awan Valley so that these lands could be taken over. And the other lands for African palm production, and African palms they employ very few people. They're extremely destructive environmentally. They suck out the water table, and a lot of this has been funded by the World Bank and other multilateral development banks. So that, and it destroys these campesino small farmer livelihoods. Also, the Afro-Indigenous people along the Caribbean coast, also they've been forced off their lands, and also tourist development, so you say multinational tourist development or corporate tourist development, including by Honduran elites, is that they have their eyes on this beach land, which is traditional fishing villages owned by the Garifuna Afro-Indigenous people with legal rights to that land. Then people are terrorized off of that land in the name of tourist developments, and then they don't get hired in those. They're not people that are going to get hired there. Most famously, hydroelectric dams are made. How many have heard of Berta Cáceres? A lot of people probably. Most famous Honduran activists who, indigenous activists of the Lenca people, but also a very important person, feminist activists, resistance activists, who was assassinated 3 years ago on March 2nd. And she and the Lenca people were fighting a hydroelectric dam on the Guanaparque River, and that dam project was funded by Europe and by owned by Honduran elites. And it was destroying their traditional environment. They had been fighting that dam peacefully for many, many years, using their legal rights as indigenous people. And she received at least 33 death threats prior to assassination, and the government ignored them. And last November, 7 people were convicted of killing her, and including 2 current at the time member of the military and a former one, and people connected to the management of the dam company. The intellectual authors at the time, including allegedly the Vice President of Congress and the members of the Atala family, the justice is still not been served in their case. But this is just one emblematic campaign. If you follow Honduras at the grassroots right now, there are dozens of campaigns against dams and also against mining projects. And a lot of the mining projects are funded by Canadians, which is true all over Central America. 30% of the entire property, you probably understand these things really well because of fracking and underground rights in Colorado. I've been learning this just today about here. 30% of all the land underneath Honduras has mining concessions right after the coup. And then those mining projects are also gutting traditional communities, forcing people off the land. There's not only the caravans from Honduras northward, but those people are secondary migrations of people. The rural urban migrations are also internal displacement is into the hundreds of thousands of people, not only Honduran people. And finally, the so-called biggest sector of the formal economy is the maquiladoras, the export processing plants. That there's about 140,000 people employed there, mostly apparel production and textiles, but also some instrument panels for cars. And those jobs, they only hire young people. They work 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. They breathe cotton dust with no protections for the most part. There's no air conditioning. They're really, really horrible jobs. And then they destroy people's jobs, and then they just cast aside, and new young people are hired. And there's very interesting union activity, some of it really successful going on there. But the maquiladora sector is the one formal sector. So finally, I'll just talk about the state sector and government jobs, and then I'll talk about U.S. and resistance. Somebody's popular. After the coup, the elites just robbed the government blind, and most famously, the teachers, there were very strong teachers' unions before the coup, and they had this very large pension fund, such as my own pension fund, and the Micheletti, the post-coup dictator, and his cronies robbed the entire teachers' pension fund within a few months.
Can't hear
That
you.
was it.
Could you say that again?
The teachers' pension fund was robbed by the post-coup government elites, okay? But over and over again, in these corruption scandals are showing that money, and this is all of them in their papers, which is these dummy NGOs, nonprofit groups are formed, the government then funds them, and then the money goes to then various elites. Most famously, in 2013, the National Health Service collapsed, and it was a very good, in relative terms, National Health Service, a whole system of hospitals and doctors and free health care for people who paid into through the informal economy, but also small business people. And then small business people and professionals paying for people that work for them. But middle class people went to these hospitals, working class people on the formal economy. And in 2013, it almost went bankrupt, that whole national system, and at least 3,000 people died, and things like no dialysis machines. This is still true to this day, doctors and nurses don't get paid. But there was this huge scandal about medicines being sold and bought and sold by the hospital system by people that they weren't even that real medicine at all, that people died from that. The ambulances were sold for like 3 or 4 times their actual price. Just all this tremendous corruption by the people that control the hospital system. Most famously, in 2015, a journalist who was just convicted for 10 years for character defamation, named David Romero, in a different case, but it was clearly punishment for this, revealed checks that the Attorney General, who's still the Attorney General, has revealed are real, that show that the President and his election campaign and the ruling party election campaign stole as much as $90 million from the National Health Service to pay for their campaigns. And you can see the checks online. You can go to the website and says to Juan Orlando's for president or National Party 2013 campaign. You can see the bank accounts. It's all there. And that's just one level of corruption that's going on all over the place. And there's some cases that are coming out every day, new cases. So when I say they just robbed the government coffers blind, I'm not exaggerating. It's highly documented. But so what that does, and I'll talk, is, but also there are policies such as International Monetary Fund. It has lent hundreds of $millions to Honduras since the coup. And if you read their minutes, they'll say they are supporting these neoliberal privatization. So the electrical company and the port and eventually the health service are being privatized and sold by piece, and there's every day in the papers say these are the sectors that are not going to have any electricity this weekend, right? I mean, it's this massive disaster, and also the state-owned telephone company. And IMF, the International Monetary Fund minutes say we're helping them lower their wage bill. Okay, these are austerity programs, right? Been going on in Latin America for a long time now. Which is they lend them a lot of money and then pay it back. You have to destroy state services, and now they just said they're helping them right-size their wage bill. And I'm like, they figured out that lower the wage bill doesn't sound so good. So right-size is some code for laying people off and paying them less. And and after some of those loans were approved, about 4 or 5 years ago, every day there would be some new government agency with 8,000 people, just union jobs with pensions just obliterated. And that still goes on routinely. And so that also means that not only have government jobs been restored by deliberate state policy and multilateral developments supporting that, but also those state services that those people used to provide. For example, the Super Women and Families and Children that was eliminated, like the very same time the 57,000 minors were arriving at the U.S. border in 2014. So what you can see here is the larger picture is what we see as violence and poverty are constructed by government policy. Okay, these are but the elites are either stealing the money, they're running policies that destroy state services, they are overseeing the police and the military that are killing people. So it's not just, these are deliberately constructed policies siphoning money away from poor people that are more and more impoverished, destroying their ways of life, going into the hands of the elites, but also countenancing the kind of police and military repression that is deployed also against those who challenge this. Okay, let me just say a little bit about the United States, and we'll back to the coup itself. The U.S., we don't have the smoking gun that the U.S. said green-lighted the coup. No one believes that the military would have done it without U.S. approval. And so since we're in the middle of some regime change operations going on out there in Venezuela and Nicaragua to speak, you can see how these things play out on a bigger scale in live time. The U.S. certainly, although we would call it a coup, Obama called it a coup, he handed it over to Hillary Clinton, and was pretty silent about that. They refused to ever call it a military coup, and they said, well, because the law says if it's a military coup, substantial military involvement is the law, that you have to cut all aid, and the U.S. cut a little bit, and then only after several weeks, and never used the term military, and basically treated Micheletti, the post-coup dictator, as an equal to the democratically elected President Zelaya, and moved it into negotiations between the two, rather than saying Zelaya has to be absolutely returned to his own country, and he tried repeatedly to return, and they moved negotiations into Costa Rica where the US could control it and out of the Organization of American States where it didn't at the time control the OAS, and played out time. What?
Slower, please.
Yeah, this is the tricky part. It played out time treating Micheletti, the dictator, as an equal to the democratically elected president until the already scheduled elections, which are in November, and the coup was in June, okay? So by the time you get to November, to the regularly scheduled elections, all the opposition candidates except one had pulled out. And the other traditional conservative party that Zelaya had come from had fallen apart because he was deposed and the other one was a dictator. But left the only party standing was the other conservative party, the National Party. And everybody else, the opposition candidates, all pulled out. No international observers would observe it because there was tremendous repression going on by the military and the police and private actors, except for the international, the IRI, the Republican Party branch, observed it. And then the U.S. immediately recognized the outcome of this illegitimate election. And the most interesting thing about Honduras and all of Hillary Clinton's emails is actually an email from Thomas Shannon, who the guy at the State Department who's the architect of all this, and U.S. policy in Latin America until last January when he was forced out. But there's one where he says, just say it's a beautiful, when the election happens today, just say it's a beautiful example of democracy in action. And then nobody says, that's a beautiful example of democracy in action. We welcome 130 people, a new government of national reconciliation. Okay? And so the U.S. recognized Porfirio Lobo, the outcome of that election, and then after that, Juan Orlando Hernandez. So Lobo was the president 4 years, and the U.S. just kept celebrating, even though he kept repressing demonstrations and all kinds of other terrible things. The most important figure since then is Juan Orlando Hernandez, who is now the current president, I would say also the clearly dictator. He was a member of Congress at the time of the coup and was part of a committee that supported the criminal coup. When he was president of Congress in 2012, he led something called the technical coup, that in the middle of the night, Congress deposed 4 out of 5 members of the constitutional part of the Supreme Court and named new ones the next day. So, you can imagine, Trump just says, okay, everybody in the Supreme Court is gone, all except the one who's loyal to me, and guess what that guy is now? Attorney General, right? So they named new ones the next day completely illegally, okay? That's the so-called technical coup of 2000, led by Juan Orlando Hernandez. At that point, controlled all the reins of power, even before he was elected. It was very clear. Okay, then he ran for president in 2013 on a campaign to a soldier on every corner that the military would take over policing, because the police were corrupt, right? But the military are even just as scary, and they kill people routinely with impunity. And then, and he has sort of advanced this military role in Honduras. And then in 2000, when this all happened, that Supreme Court in turn then ruled in favor of Juan Orlando in another issue, which is that the Honduran Constitution says very clearly that no president can be reelected, or vice president, and that it's illegal to even discuss it, promoting it. You can discuss it, you can't promote it while in office, okay? So he decides announces he's running for president, and the Supreme Court that he himself had, the new one that he imposed through the technical coup, then ruled, even though the Constitution is really clear-cut, and it's just like the US, you cannot change the Constitution like a big, drawn-out, complicated, years-long process. They said, well, we rule that the Constitution overthrows, violates international human rights norms, so re-election is fine, okay? So his whole candidacy was illegal, still is, okay? So then he runs for president in an illegal campaign, and then supposedly wins, and then the opposition was a united opposition under a man named Salvador Nasrallah, and the election was on November 27th, not this last one, the one before. And the night of the election, the results are coming in, 57% of the results are in. It all shows that Nasrallah is ahead by like 8 or 9 points, okay? It's like, and everybody's like, oh my God, he won. They actually allowed him to win. And if he was ahead legally by 8 or 9 points, that means he was ahead by 25 points, because that's after all the voter manipulation, all the scaring people away, all the vote buying operations, all of that, okay? And people are like, oh my God, this is so thrilling. They dared to hope for about 3 hours. And the government shut down the computers for 2 days, 5% of the time, released the data for the next week and a half, and lo and behold, Juan Orlando won by 1.5%. So he stole the elections, very much understood. The head of the OAS said he had, this was not, these are not reliable results, there should be a new election. And the U.S. blessed the outcome and recognized Juan Orlando. And he was inaugurated a year ago this last weekend. So he's stolen the election, that was his illegal campaign. So that's who we have in power now. And he controls the Attorney General, he controls the Supreme Court. It's a new Supreme Court put in 2 years ago. He has a new Supreme Court, it's about a year or two, I don't know exactly when the new one came in. He controls the military, the police, and he controls the majority of Congress, which is a swing party, but they side with him. And the opposition party has seats in Congress, but can never get to the majority. So that's the situation now. He's very terrifying. He's illegally there as president and with the blessing of the United States. So how does the United States fit into this? The U.S. has recognized him, given a green light every step of the way. It's not just they blessed the coup. People want to focus on Hillary and the coup, but it's over and over again. It's also John Kerry. It's also clearly Trump, green lighting election stealing after election stealing, green lighting the technical coup, green lighting the Supreme Court decision. Speaking of him as a great friend, in fact, there's a great story by Associated Press in April last year about John Kelly, used to be head, our John Kelly, same one, used to be head of the United States Southern Command and gave multiple public statements, pictures of, all sorts of wonderful, smiling pictures of him. Here's a picture of, here he is. Mr. Kelly, I don't used to know who he was, so where's Mr. Kelly? Here they are. This is John Kelly, Juan Orlando, all smiling. And he was head of the Southern Command and gave multiple statements saying what a magnificent job Juan Orlando is doing of fighting drug trafficking. Even like less than 2 years ago said Juan Orlando was a great guy and a good friend. This was when he was head of Homeland Security briefly. And backed him up all the way. So you're going to want to see, it's not just they tolerate, they've celebrated him. And it's not just money pouring into the Honduran government and security forces, but also the endorsing the really big money comes through the International Monetary Fund, Inter-American Development Bank, and the World Bank. But also this legitimation, even celebration of him. Heidi Fulton, who's the acting ambassador right now, just last week celebrated the friendship and collaboration between the Honduran government and the United States. And Pence made similar remarks, and so did the current head of the Southern Command, and that we're one big happy family fighting drug traffickers and gangs together. Well, they were a little quieter in these statements about, they didn't so much talk about fighting drug traffickers together. I think they're aware of how bad it's looking right now. And okay, so that is a big question, but last thing I want to say about the United States is why is the United States doing this, right? And of course this is part of the long arc of dancing with dictators, of whoever will be lying to the United States, and you can see that playing out in the moving embassy to Jerusalem, Honduras supporting that, the overthrow of the regime and I'm not supporting the government of Venezuela, but I think the United States should be overthrown it, okay? So this coup attempt going on in Venezuela, Honduras is backing that. I mean, it's a geostrategic thing. The U.S., when the center-left and left governments came to power, when democracy came to Latin America in the 1990s and 2000s, people voted for governments of the center-left and the left, right? And that was a huge threat to U.S. power. And the U.S. was losing, or lost for a while, its domination of Latin America, which it has assumed it's to be its own sense of the Monroe Doctrine. And so Honduras was one of the few lockdown allies, which is part of this. It's a geopolitical thing about U.S. wanting to have control over the hemisphere. But why does it want control over the hemisphere? Against an alleged threat from China and Russia. Now, China is a serious global power, and the stuff it does in Africa through its economic projects is scary, and also stuff that's going on in Ecuador. But China is not a threat in Honduras. It's not in Honduras. Honduras is actually aligned with Taiwan still, but also, and it's not like China and Russia are actually in Honduras, okay? But it's this larger, it's like the Cold War, which is, if we don't stay in bed with the dictators and shore them up, China and Russia will move in. And you see this Hondurans, they just laugh. I mean, you can be like, who is it that's been shoring up the dictators? Who is it that helped overthrow our government? Who is it that has this giant bunker in the middle of our country that, that is killing, that is behind these state security forces that are killing people? So like, give us our chances, please. It can't be any worse than this. And that's what you tell them, because I went down, I said, look, this is what the State Department is saying. They said, what? They didn't even know what I was talking about at some level. So it's also, the U.S. foreign policy in the region is also traditionally, in a generic sense, about making the region safe for transnational corporate events and investments. And it's not as simple as the days of the United Fruit. You know, the Canadians, you can see it, the mining companies and Gildan, the giant tech companies. But it is like making sure that these are places where US-based corporations can go down there, exploit the environment, exploit labor, and have the whole region have a pro-corporate politics, and it's a regional thing, right? And the other piece of this is the military, which has taken me a long time to understand, which in many ways is an engine that runs of itself. And they have competitions, the Southern Command has competitions with the other big regional military groups. Kelly even said once that he said some threatening things because he said them just because he wanted more money for the Southern Command budget, right? He said like, if Ebola gets to Central America, when Central Americans start coming to the United States, it'll be Katie the barn doors. You know, so there's going to be this invasion of poor, sick Central Americans. Well, of course, that's kind of what they're saying now. But he admitted that he had said that because he wanted more funding for the Southern Command. Okay, that's how cynical these people are. And it's taken me a long time to disaggregate these different interests because, of course, we want to expect more of our government. And I think people wanted more of Obama and were blindsided by it in particular. So let me finally talk about the resistance, and we can talk about how we fit in here. Because like I said before, it's not just a story of victims. It's a story of actually beautiful and successful and joyous organizing by people who have been tremendously repressed by the government, not just the campesinos, thousands and thousands of human rights abuses by state security forces. Most recently, in the aftermath of the election, when people poured into the streets to peacefully protest and blocked roads to say you cannot take over our government like this. The military and the police used live bullets against peaceful protesters and bystanders. For the first time, they did not use live bullets after the coup. And let me also say the resistance has never taken up armed struggle against, although so many people in resistance have been killed, usually by assassinations. But this is live bullets. You can see videos of them just shooting rifles over a barrier and into a crowd of protesters, or just driving by and shooting at people that were just observing by the side of the road. And there's at least 22 people, maybe as many 40, and that's the UN and human rights groups from Honduras documenting that all those cases remain in impunity a year later. So when the coup happened, this incredible resistance movement came forward, and people were really blown away. Honduras, if those of you that are old enough to know, Honduras was not the cool place during the 1980s. You know, like the armed struggle, or had huge opposition parties. That was Guatemala, that was El Salvador, that was Nicaragua. Honduras didn't even have a political party until after the coup. And so in Honduras, a lot of Honduras, there was a series left in Honduras. A lot of those people actually went and fought in Nicaragua, or were killed. For the most, and one theory is that because there was more advanced agrarian reform in Honduras, you don't have the same rural struggle. But for whatever reason, Honduras was sort of, they would say this themselves, they were considered like the armpit of Central America. It was not the cool place, right? And when the coup happened, these social movements that had been little by little building from below in the decade before, the women's movement, the campesino movement, the indigenous movement, the Afro-Indigenous movement, human rights organizations, they really rose up and joined together in what we would consider our own, I like to think, our own fantasy coalition of all those groups, the LGBT movement, the labor movement, human rights activists, other folks like the Jesuits, and also people in the middle class committed to the rule of law, because they had fought so hard for constitutional order and the rule of law. Now the US media said everybody in that category was a Zelaya supporter. Let me tell you, hardly those people like Zelaya supported Zelaya. They supported constitutional rule of law and democratic processes, and they knew what this was going to mean. But the coalition surprised everybody, and the whole first chapter of my book has a lot of details about the joy and wonderful music and graffiti and culture of the first 2 years, and how the kids sat up straight. A whole new younger generation was politicized. Great graffiti, like the Cardinal blessed the coup on the 6th day, and there was a graffiti that said, "Nadie ama al Cristo como el Cardinal ama al Pisto." No one loves Christ like the Cardinal loves cash. You know, like, or then the police paid these got the junior high kids to paint over the graffiti. and they signed at the bottom, Borrame, and go please, there's something signed that, oh, thank you for cleaning the chalkboard, from signed the National Front of Popular Resistance. I mean, just great stuff, and little songs that people would ever, the little kids would all know the song, and people listen to opposition radio all the time, and it's a very beautiful thing in many ways. While all the state terror was happening, and that disappeared from the story, and these massive street protests for the first 2 years. The end of 2 years, there was a giant broker deal in which Zelaya was allowed to return to the country, not as president, but allowed to return at all. And Honduras was admitted to the Organization of Mixed States, and the other countries finally started, except Ecuador, recognized the government of Pepe Lobo, the post-coup fake elected government. And when he came back, part of the opposition, the resistance, created a new political party called Libre, the first center-left opposition party successful in Honduran history. There was a little one before that. And that party then became very huge and a big part of the resistance. Other people in the resistance said, we are not ready to be a party. There's going to be too much opportunism. There's too much of the old liberal party opportunists crawling around here and patronage systems. We're not ready for this, but other people took control of it, especially Zelaya, the deposed president. And that party did run a big electoral campaign, very successful in 2015, against Juan Orlando as candidate. And Zelaya's wife, Xiomara Castro, ran for president under Libre and probably won the election. She was ahead again at the time of the last polls, and they shut down all the polls a month before the election. And Libre became the second biggest party in Congress. So they went from 0 to like, the right-wing party had 48, they had 36, the other right-wing party had 24, and then another party, the anti-corruption party, had 12, and a couple others. And so but they've been blocked, though, from their exercising power in Congress. Another moment you might remember was in 2015, the so-called indignados, or outraged ones, torch marches. These were middle-class people. So when it was revealed that Juan Orlando and his party had stolen all that money from the National Health Service, the middle-class people marched, and I talk about it in the book, and you might, it's in the New York Times, and they carried torches to represent the people that died, okay? And they spread all over the country, and eventually had like 75,000 people in the biggest marches in the big cities. And I saw the two biggest ones, and I have to say, I've been to a lot of demos in my life, and there's a picture of one of those in the book. It was Sarkani, it was one of the most beautiful things I ever said. We crossed the bridge, and they start marching just before dark, and you could see 75,000 tiki torches in every direction as far as you could see. And it was really spine-tinglingly beautiful. And the people, it's very unclear who organized those. It's very ambiguous politically. A lot of those people were actual coup supporters that had had enough with the corruption. They saw what Juan Orlando and the coup operatives had done, right? And you could tell they're middle class by their clothes, the way they talk. A lot of them said, until these protests had never been a demonstration. But a lot of the traditional resistance, ambivalently, naturally, because they've been paying the price for demonstrating for 4 or 5 years now, joined these as well, because people also understand if you're going to move forward, you have to have an alliance between middle-class people and working-class people and from these different sectors. And they demanded a commission like the one in Guatemala. The CC got a commission, they demanded that Juan fuera Ho is the slogan, Juan Orlando out, that he would resign, and so it's the Attorney General, and the commission of a creation of UN commission, like the very successful one that was just now kicked out of Guatemala. And the US intervened and said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to have a commission through the Organization of American States where the US now controls, and they created this very weak anti-corruption commission that does some good things, has very little power, and makes it look like corruption is being fought. Right? These show politics of anti-corruption that have been going on ever since, but they do some good things. Okay, now you would never know any of this, although some of these were in the papers at the time. When you hear the story about nothing but poverty and violence in Honduras, it's all terrible down there. You don't hear that they have a successful opposition party. You don't hear that they won, you might say, the controversial election of a year ago. That's the most you might get. You wouldn't get that there's a beautiful new convergence of everybody from the center right all the way through the left right now calling for a new election, right? If you watch the Vine printed interviews with the people in the caravans, there are at least 3 former Libre Party Congress members that have joined caravans because they've been threatened or they're so poor or both, right? There are tons of people carrying signs that say Fuera Ho, Juan Orlando out, in the caravans, right, with sophisticated, along with other people who are just naive about, well, Trump's going to change his mind and we're poor and we want help, right? There's a broad range, but there's very, particularly the caravan that left last spring, very explicitly political agenda, but also looking for a new strategy to keep from being killed and starving to death, and also they don't want their children to be killed. So all of that is going on right now. And you would never know about this. And the other piece of this that you would not know from this, the last thing I'm going to say, is that there's been a long history of pushback to this in the United States Congress ever since the coup, particularly starting in 2012. There have been multiple letters from members of Congress, including one that had 84 and one that had 94 members of the House have signed letters saying cut all police and military aid. The Berta Cáceres Human Rights in Honduras Act, which was originally introduced in 2016, and again, it's about to be reintroduced, had 71 members on it last year. 71 members of the House signed a letter of supporting, have signed on as co-sponsors of the bill. The bill says cut all police and military aid and vote no on all new multilateral development bank loans, okay, to the security forces. And so until these human rights issues are addressed. And that just disappears. And also, senators over and over again, that you may not know that of the money for the most of the money for the central government in Honduras, 50% of that money has human rights conditions on it that says if you don't address these human rights issues and corruption issues, the money will not be released. And the State Department has to certify those conditions have been met. And they've gotten bigger every year since 2020. We don't know yet we don't have a budget yet for 2019, but they're into 2019 money. And every year, the State Department says, oh yeah, the conditions have been met, which is preposterous. In fact, they certified it 3 days after the elections in 2017. Interestingly enough, they still have not certified for the 2018 money. For the first time, they didn't ever certify in that calendar year, which maybe they just don't have their act together. But it shows that organizing works because that money has not been released. But of course it's not public, and of course that disappears from that meeting. And there are senators that have the right to hold back money, and they do it from time to time. In 2012, Senator Leahy was a very powerful position. Now he's ranking Democrat on appropriations. At the time he was in the majority, holds back money regularly for Honduras, sometimes for years, because of human rights issues. Okay, now what's happening right now? You probably know that Trump has been doing all these tweets saying, don't give them any money until they stop all immigration. They're not doing anything, the latest one, they're not doing anything to stop it. He wants to do punish them for allowing their people to leave. Okay? And of course all the hideous policies, cutting back on the asylum process and demonizing and racializing poor people fleeing Honduras for all these reasons that include US policy. Now, when Trump does that, and also, first of all, there are millions of dollars of U.S. money being spent in Honduras to say, don't migrate. And so, you know how many jobs that could be created from that? And probably at least $10 million, probably more than that, in the last 5 years, have been spent, 4 years, on these propaganda campaigns. And you can see it down there. Or go to the acting ambassador's Twitter feed and take pictures of, don't leave, the United States will probably not let you in, it's dangerous, don't put your children at risk. But also the Honduran government is doing all these things like beefing up its border patrol, paid for by the United States in part, to try to stop people from leaving their own country, and running huge propaganda campaigns against immigration because it's making them look bad. And they're very complicated because they kind of want people to leave, they want the remittance money to shore up the economy. There's a lot going on there at the Honduran end. Now, but one notch down from Trump himself, and I don't need to fill in blank about how nuts he is actually Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and John Bolton, the National Security Advisor. But the person calling the shots is Marco Rubio. Now, Marco Rubio is also the one calling the shots on this attempt to overthrow the government of Venezuela. But he's been calling the shots. I started hearing this last summer from people in the Senate, that it was Pompeo who was controlling Western Hemisphere affairs. Not the head of Western Hemisphere affairs at the State Department, Kimberly Breyer, who is a career State Department person, CIA, excuse me. And I'm not, that's not her biography, I'm not saying, oh, she's CIA. She is in fact CIA. But Rubio is very ideological. So it's Cuba, it's Venezuela, they're socialists, even if they're not, right? Okay, and if Honduras is therefore against them, then it's good, right? So it's a very volatile, not even the sort of suave empire, right? So, but then you go down and up, and actually, when, well, a few months right before the US elections, when Trump was saying cut the aid, Rubio was saying, no, don't cut the aid, okay? So why does he not want to cut the aid? Because they want to stabilize the regime, right? They don't want to cut the aid. So now you're getting a convergence of people reacting. When Trump says, cut the aid, then you get people on the right and center to liberals saying, give them a lot of money for economic development, right? To stop poverty, or even to support your security forces to fight crime. Now that train is kind of stuck cats out of the bag. They're not getting so far with that. But you know, even in Washington office in Latin America, which can be very good, they pose as liberals on the Hill, but they're actually often very close to the State Department on Honduras policy, and they tweeted right before the elections, like, if Mr. Trump wants to stop immigration, he shouldn't cut money for Honduran border enforcement and other security forces. And I have that tweet, like saying, you know, that's in other words, like, yes, we should stop immigration, and we should do so by helping the Honduran border patrol, continuing to fund the Honduran border patrol. Now, there's also a position that says, give them lots of money, but put even more conditions on it. So we can say, we'll give you that money if you'll do the right thing, right? But there's two sets of money. There are many sets. There's this security funding, which is like not my name, right? You know, there's that, but it's also symbolic. They can get money from the Inter-American Development Bank, or from the EU, or from Canada. It's like of the whole money. The big funding is from the banks and for USAID and the so-called development money. But most of that money is fed to the Honduran government, and they just use it to, again, support this destructive model of economic development, which is not what the Honduran people want. And they are never given the chance to say, what do we want for our economic? So even well-meaning people say, give the money for this, give the money for this, through programs, as opposed to the policy, which is to support this regime, right? So you cannot spend your way through benevolent programs out of this problem. Even though many of us, our impulse would say, give more money to the Honduran government, you're just shoring them up and rewarding them for terrorizing their own people out of their country and laughing all the way to the bank. So and it's tricky, you know, I was in contact with somebody, a very middle-class Honduran doctor who's been in the US for about 30 years, very upstanding, emailed me out of the blue, we talked on the phone about a month ago, and I was asking him what he thought, you know, like tentative, I don't know what his politics are, he clearly read my book, likes me, whatever. And I said, because I wanted to know what he thought about this funding. He says, we should give that government 1 cent. And, and he was very sophisticated in that. So let me say, how do you fit in? Congress didn't wake itself up. All those things I said that Congress did happened because of a huge solidarity movement from below, Hondurans, all kinds of allies in the United States, faith-based people, labor movement, AFL-CIO, Sierra Club, all these people have been doing a lobbying that endorsed the Berta Cáceres Act that's been endorsed by all sorts of folks. There's a whole network of us that have been doing grassroots group with all kinds of people like yourselves all over the country since day one of the coup. It's really growing. There were 180 people at my talk in Fort Collins last night. Its caravan has really highlighted this. What is U.S. policy doing? And so thank you all for coming, but also saying that it happens at the grassroots. I mean, we want something to do. Go for Bennett, asking him to come. You can aim high. I've learned in this work, I've done a lot of work in Congress, like aim high and then see what you can settle for, okay? You know, tell him to introduce a Berta Cáceres Act in the Senate. Tell him to work with Merkley on that. Tell him to work with Leahy on that. You know, tell him to put out a statement about what's going on in Honduras right now. There's lots of other small level things he can be putting statements out about human rights situation in Honduras, short of saying cut the police and military aid. He can just say another voice heard from. Any one senator speaks up. He did sign, and I gather people here are responsible for this. I'm like, how did Benny get on this? Okay, in 2013, for a long time there's all these letters coming out of the House, and then Senator Mikulski did the first one with 7 senators on it. But in 2013, Senator Cardin led on a letter that the staff and I, I'll say this now, wrote, working with them. And it stopped short of saying cut police and military aid because senators were not ready for that. They're more conservative. It says, I went back and looked at it, and it's really kicked butt. I'm being recorded saying that. It uses surprisingly strong language. Says, we're deeply concerned about grave human rights abuses by the Honduran military and questioning U.S. funding for that. 21, there's a national campaign for this for a month. 21 senators signed that, including Senator Bennett. And I'm like, who got Bennett? You know, like they're just like, and I'm like, where does Michigan people? What? And you got, yeah, you know too. And oh yes, that was an easier one. I had worked out those, but I'm like, where did this come from? And there were several of those, like, well, who got Casey? And it was a beautiful moment when you can actually see your power from the grassroots and from the bottom up. And then State Department notices, like I happened to be at the State Department like 3 days after that thing came out. But let me tell you, they did not see that one coming. And they said, oh, we've been doing nothing but Honduras for 3 days. You know, like they were jumping up and down real fast when they saw 21 senators. And we just got 13 on something very low-level letter raising concerns about repression of journalists and outside observers, and also threats to sue the Associated Press reporters who wrote that story about the most recent story about the police. And we did get 30 senators, and Bennett wasn't on it, but I think this was nobody even, it happened really fast, and nobody even asked. But people, you hear one senator is worth 50 members. Now I'm saying this to cheer you up because DeGette hasn't been on anything. I looked up to see if she would, but it's really interesting what's going on in the House right now. And things are moving left. There's, icebergs are breaking up. There's a lot of exciting new energy. There's also new energy on the right. 2 former CIA people, including Abigail Spanberger, who's already challenging Pelosi on immigration stuff from the right. There's a bunch of ex-military people, but there's also thrilling new people up on the left. And so there are a lot of new alignments. I don't know what committee she's on, but it's worth trying. And what's the new now that replaced Clovis? What?
Or Negus?
Yeah, I mean, like, but go for him. Like, you can all, you could say, well, I grew up in Boulder. I always say, my mother's from the district. I grew up in the district. I worked about 10 districts out in California. Always look bigger than you are. I represent the blah, blah, blah church of, they don't know what, they don't necessarily know who you are, especially in Washington, right? So you always look bigger than you are. But it does mean that organizing works, and Congress is not the only front here. Write letters to the editor. They're very, write op-eds. You don't have to be, it's not rocket science. They like local people. Get your church involved, get your union involved, get your school involved, and always look bigger than you are. But it's actually an interesting moment right now. And the Bear-to-Casters Act will be reintroduced on March 2nd. And it's going to be really interesting to see how many people are going to be on it. There's going to be pushback, and there's going to be this push from, there's been a lot of very interesting op-eds since my book came out. I've been saying this stuff of like, you get op-eds that say, U.S. policy is responsible with Honduras disaster. And you read, oh, this is great, who is this person? How come I've never heard of them? And then you read along, and it says, Hillary supported the coup, blah, blah, blah. And by the end, like, that's why we need to give them even more money. And like, they're circling back around, like, well, like, not, it's very slippery. And there's been like 5 mystery op-eds that have all came out over the course of 3 weeks. So this is slippery. Right? Because I'm thinking, cool, and then some of them are connected to Vanderbilt University, which is very tied with the State Department, and so there's all kinds of complicated things out there. But you can have whatever opinion you want, but just speak up. Hell, in there.
Thank you.